Alberto Villoldo is a medical anthropologist and psychologist who has studied the spiritual practices of the Amazon and the Andes for well over 25 years. While he was at the San Francisco State University, he founded the Biological Self-Regulation Laboratory to study how the mind creates psychosomatic health and disease. He is the founder of the Four Winds Society and instructs individuals throughout the world in the practice of energy medicine. He has written over 12 best-selling books, including Shaman, Healer, Sage, Illumination, The Shaman's Way of Healing, and Power Up Your Brain, The Neuroscience of Enlightenment. And it is with great pleasure to welcome all of you and introduce all of you to Alberto Villoldo. So, Alberto, if you'd like to take this.
Thank you, Robin, and welcome everyone. It's great to be back with you and to be doing another adventure with Great Mysteries. And today we're going to be speaking about how our perception is all a projection of an internal map that we carry within us, and how once we become familiar with this concept, we can do what the shamans refer to as dreaming the world into being. We can change our internal map and the external world changes. Pretty exciting, isn't it? So the shamans are the ancient medicine men and women. You find them in every culture. They are the pre-religious traditions before these wisdom teachings became structured into religions and hierarchical. And in the process of becoming hierarchical, most everybody except those at the top became disempowered. So they had to go through power brokers in order to get to spirit, and in order to, and then reality became fixed. We could no longer dream our world into being. It began to be dreamt for us by our religious beliefs and later by our political beliefs. So what the shamans discovered is that we are dreaming the world into being all the time. And when we're not happy with our world, we have to go back inside and change the internal maps of the world that we have, including the spiritual world. And everything changes. And to understand this, it's helpful to understand that shamans are people of the percept. In the West, we're people of the precept. We get precepts. Precepts are rules. So we get 10 commandments. We expect to find the correct answers in tests. Once we know the rules, we can work through anything. So we're people of the rules. And in fact, we elect legislators, lawmakers, to run the country. Can you imagine anything as absurd as electing lawyers to run anything? And they do this by passing new laws. So you've never heard of, in the United States, of Congress getting together and saying, you know, we have too many rules. We have too many laws. No, there's new legislation that's passed all the time. So we're people of the precept. The Greeks were people of the concept. They didn't live by rules. They knew there was nothing as powerful as an idea whose time had come. Shamans seldom live by rules. Only occasionally do they get ideas, but they're people of the percept. So if they want to change the world, they don't pass new legislation, they don't come up with a new idea. I mean, the Greeks came up with some astonishing ideas, like philosophy or democracy. But when shamans want to change the world, they change their perception. They change the internal map. Now, the problem is that we believe the internal map is real, when it's not. It's simply a cultural map. It's a biological map. It's a map that we learned from our ancestors. So these are the beliefs that are deeply encoded in every cell in our body about the nature of reality, about the nature of the world, about the nature of healing, about what you can heal from and what you cannot heal from, about how long we will live. You know, I just finished doing a week in a beautiful Caribbean island with Dr. Mark Hyman, who's the author of a stunning book on diabetes called the blood sugar solution. And Mark and I were talking to the attendees. Was a week of cleansing and detox. And we were talking about how wellness creates health, how health eliminates illness, so that you don't have to focus on diseases. We have to focus on creating health, and then disease goes away. But our medical model says that you've got to treat illness. Well, shamans understood that you've got to treat health. And we believe that if we want to live a long and healthy life, that we have to avoid the illnesses of old age. For the shamans, if you want to avoid the illnesses of old age, the recipe is to live a long and healthy life. So this sounds a little bit difficult to comprehend at the beginning, but you can program your belief structure so that you're not part of the bell curve. Because the bell curve says 29% of the population will die of cancer, 32% of heart disease, and only one of us is going to die in the arms of his or her beloved at the age of 120 after great sex. And we're all going to want to be that person. So once we become familiar with our internal map of reality, we can begin to modify it. We no longer have to become a statistic. We no longer have to be part of the bell curve. My friend Bruce Lipton, that many of you know his work, The Biology of Belief, was visiting with us. We went on holiday for a week. He came to visit us in Chile, where my wife and I lived for part of the year. And we were talking about how deeply embedded our beliefs are, so much so that we confuse them for reality. They're embedded cellularly, and how we develop so many of our beliefs even before we're born. That we're born with already 50% of our personality developed, and then the other 50%, our other 50% of beliefs we acquire in the first 5 or 6 years of life. And Bruce was saying to me how the placental barrier is very permeable. And all the stress hormones from the mother begin to create neural networks, belief structures encoded in neural networks in the brain and nervous system. So that if our mother believed that her man was not going to be there for her, we were born into a world where you could not trust men. Or she wasn't sure how they were going to survive, or she did not know what she was going to do with this baby, we were born into a world that we could not count on to support us. Because these beliefs had become embedded in our brain and nervous system. So the task of the shaman, of course, is to point out that how limiting these beliefs are, how they limit our experience. We're born into worlds of scarcity. And I remember one of the poorest people that I knew, who believed that he did not have enough. And of course, if you're born into a world of scarcity, you never have enough. So the task of the shaman is to shatter all of these beliefs, to understand that every single one of our beliefs is limiting. And they're practical in the sense that they give us a way of relating to life, but they're not reality. So we go on a journey, an inner journey, to discover the landscape of our soul, of our psyche, those perceptions that we then project out onto the world and confuse for reality. And this process is not pretty, because it generally involves a death and rebirth, a death and resurrection, which is the shamanic initiation, the classic shamanic initiation, where we die to everything that we think that we have been until then. And we are born anew. We are born with not with a set of beliefs now, but with a hypothetical relationship with the world, where we can try things out to see how they work. You know, I remember being in the Andes, high in the Andes mountains, one time. I had been hiking for 4 days to get to this village. And I get to the village mid-afternoon, and I knew a few of the shamans in the village, and they invite me to a gathering that they were having that evening, where they were dealing with a very difficult problem, an extremely complex and difficult problem. And they assigned this to one of the youngest medicine women, one of the youngest shamans. They said to her, please, we know that you can come up with a solution for this. And I asked them, why did you give it to this young woman? She's the youngest of all the medicine people. And they said to me, it's because they don't know, she does not know that this is impossible yet. And she pulled it off. So now life will bring us to test our limiting beliefs, generally through a health crisis, or through the loss of a loved one, or the loss of a relationship. One of the great turning points in our lives where we feel that ahead of us there's only hell, behind us there's hell, to the left you run into hell, and to the right you run into hell. And this is a very fortunate moment, because if you don't encounter hell while you're alive, you will encounter it the moment that you die. And at that point it's too late. But when you're faced with the scenario that no matter which direction you turn, you're running into hell, you have the opportunity to delve deep within and change every one of those beliefs. In fact, throw out the whole notion of beliefs altogether, and know that you can test the world and invite it to prove you right about anything that you hold dear to your heart. But this is an easy concept to understand. But to live it, to embody it, the shamans have to go through a process of death and rebirth. Because this is what allowed you to shed the skin of the past, to shed the past the way the serpent sheds her skin. This is the understanding of the medicine people of the high Andes, but it's really shared by medicine men and women all through the Americas. I learned this in my 25 years of traveling and working with the jungle shamans and with the high Andean shamans in Peru. In the jungle with the medicine plants, you died. In fact, the medicine plant of the jungle is the ayahuasca. And aya means rope, aya means death, and huasca means rope, or the vine of death, the vine that takes you down into the underworld to meet your own death now, while you still have a body to come back to, so that you know the way back home when you're making your final crossing. Many of us who've worked with the ayahuasca have gone through this great initiation of meeting our own death. I remember one time looking at my body, unable to move, turning my head to the left and seeing that my flesh was decaying, and I could see my bones and I could smell the rot of my flesh, turning to the right and seeing how my right arm and right leg were being eaten by maggots, and then going inside and going, it's a symbolic death, it's okay. And then opening my eyes again and seeing the process continuing and freaking out and saying, what if it isn't a symbolic death? So during your initiation, you never know. You don't know if you're going to come back or not. And for those of us who've been initiated by life, by a challenge, a health challenge, or by the loss of something we considered very sacred or important, we don't know if we're going to make it. Now, what ends up happening at this point of great breakthrough and possibility is we end up on medication. We start medicating the symptoms that will be the vehicle to take us into the depths of the underworld, which is what 2012 or 2012 is about. It's bringing us collectively to deal with our hidden selves, with those deeply buried parts of ourselves personally and culturally and collectively. And, you know, I do a lot of conferences on 2012, and we've done some of them together, Robin. And people ask me, well, what happened with 2012? I thought the world was going to end. And I say to them, it did. Didn't you notice? Everything is different. Of course, it didn't end at the physical, literal level. It ended, all of the old belief structures ended, all of the old paradigms have come to a close, have proven themselves to be unsustainable, archaic dinosaurs. Our economic paradigms, our health paradigms, we used to trust our doctors with our health. Now, do you know what the third leading cause of death in America is? Our hospitals. We used to trust bankers with our money. We used to trust governments with our collective destinies. So we are in the process, of course, of a renaissance. But we cannot simply patch these systems anymore. We cannot do another bailout package for Greece. We cannot do another bailout package for our emotional lives, because it's only going to be putting on another Band-Aid or maybe bailing the boat a little. We've got to abandon ship. We've got to not reinvent, which is to come up with a slightly more improved version of who we have been. We have to let it all go and rediscover who we are again. And this reminds me of that Zen Buddhist saying where you wake up one morning and you look at yourself in the mirror and you go, I don't know who you are, but I'll wash your face anyway. So you have such a fresh discovery of yourself that you can look at the world differently. And where everybody else is perceiving problems, you begin to perceive possibilities and opportunities. And this is what makes us revolutionary. And this brings us back to that theme of perception. Where everybody else is seeing death and despair and collapse, we can see that new life is emerging. We see the opportunity for renewal, for rediscovery, for rebirth. And I know for many years before 2012, in the 1990s and the early part of this last decade, we were all spreading the bad news about how bad 2012 was going to be. And today, I believe that the revolutionaries have to begin spreading the good news about the tremendous possibilities that and opportunities that we face collectively as humanity. And to know that things will get better. But before they get better, they're probably going to get worse, a lot worse, because that's how healing crises work. A healing crisis means that you end up with a very high fever, laid up in bed, wanting to die and not being able to, and then the fever breaks, and then you begin to heal and repair. And if you're lucky, you're not only going to recover your old state of health. If you're lucky, you're going to be able to emerge into an even higher level of health than you ever had before. So this is our opportunities, because the prophecies of the Americas, and we're going to be in July 1st to the 12th in the Andes, in our annual expedition to Peru. The medicine keepers, the prophecy keepers, say that this is the time of the Great Awakening, or the Great Collective Awakening. And that those individuals that do not take that leap into the Great Awakening are going to go into the deep slumber of a hellish existence, where you are living in the netherworlds, living unconsciously. Because what 2012 is about the awakening of the collective consciousness. Not only the individual, but everybody around you, everybody around us. And in the process, the dawning of a new human, of a new human that is able to create a new body that heals differently, and that dies differently, and that maybe doesn't even have to die. So I was reading the other day about how 90% of doctors' visits are the result of people freaking out, of stress, of people freaking out. Is this stomachache that I have a stomach cancer? What am I getting? And they rush to their doctor for help, and generally they're put into, immediately, you become a patient. You become a patient with a prescribed outcome to your psychosomatic condition. So the very first thing that we need to do during these times of tremendous stress is to go back inside and find an inner calm. Find that inner place of calm where we can be at the eye of our storm, whether it be a personal storm or a collective storm, an economic crisis, an economic collapse. Now, this is exacerbated by the fact that we're experiencing the most intense solar activity that has happened in the last century. And did you see the moon a couple of nights ago? Magnificent, extraordinary, brightest moon in the century. The closest that the moon has been to the Earth, that it will be to the Earth for 100 years. Well, in the last few months, the plasma discharges from the sun that have been striking the Earth, and remember, these are very high intensity energy discharges, are shifting the collective consciousness. They're destabilizing it. They're creating the opportunity for quantum leaping. Because quantum leaps only happen when you are able to destabilize the system. Otherwise, it's just business as usual. And I remember the prophecy keeper saying to me one time, you know, our Father above is watching the creation, and he is not happy. Our mother, Pachamama, Mother Earth, our umbilical cord to Mother Earth has withered. We're no longer sustained by the Earth. And when you're not sustained by the Earth, you begin to wither internally also. There's no amount of vitamins and dietary supplements that you can take to make up for the mother's love, the energy of the earth, the chi, the prana. And the same with the Father. The prophecy keepers would say, our Father above. And I was raised a good Catholic boy, and I thought that they meant the big guy upstairs. And they said, no, not the Great Spirit. The Father above, Father Son, is witnessing the creation and is not pleased with it. So Father Son, of course, is going through a pole shift right now, a pole shift that is expected to happen this year, where the North Pole of the Sun will flip and become the South Pole, and that's going to be sending even greater shock waves through the Earth's atmosphere, creating a polar shift inside of us that is going to perhaps push us, be the straw that breaks the camel's back. And at that point, it's really advisable that you don't have a lot of emotional baggage in your backpack, and that your plate be fairly clear so that we can seize the opportunities that present themselves, instead of having to be out there putting fires out. So it's a time of tremendous opportunity, and a time to understand that everything that we perceive in the world, in our immediate world, is a projection of an inner map that we carry about reality, a map that we forged in the first 6 years of life. I remember hearing one time a Catholic priest saying what the Jesuits believed that, give me a child before the age of 6 and I'll give you a good Catholic for life. They know that the brain is malleable before that age. They know that we're programmable. Well, this is where we learn all of our programming. And all of this programming, all of these belief structures are today outdated, they're toxic, they're moldy, they're collapsing, they're putrid, and they're unsustainable. So here's where the great opportunity happens. The great opportunity occurs when we're able to look at what everybody else looks at. And instead of seeing gloom and doom, we're able to perceive opportunity. But it's one thing to perceive opportunity, and the other to be able to act on it. And I remember in my own life, when I was a young man, I was in a relationship, and I met this woman that I knew was the right person for me, but I was involved in another relationship, and I said, no, this is just a temptation and a seduction. And I ended up going through 5 years of hell when I didn't recognize the opportunity that presented itself to me and chose to act on it. Well, this is not a love opportunity that we're faced with today. It's an evolutionary opportunity. It's a revolutionary opportunity. And to do that, we have to be able to dream the world into being. Now, in order to dream the world into being, we need to become aware of how everywhere that we perceive conflict is a reflection of an inner conflict within us. Now, the fact that there's war in the Middle East is not going to change because you recognize that that's a reflection of the war within you. But when you heal the war within you, when you're able to live peace, your world, your immediate world, becomes a world of peace. When you're able to heal your environment, the waters around you begin to heal, become clean. I've been in the deep Amazon and drunk water that I knew was contaminated and polluted, but I exuded such peace and balance in my own field that water, for me, was not toxic or polluted. It was absolutely pristine and clear water. And of course, we have examples of this in the southern part of America, where we have very interesting, pretty radical fundamentalist church groups that will drink cyanide or dance with serpents, and rattlesnakes will bite them and they won't die. Because their belief structure is that God gives them the power to handle snakes, and that venom will not make them sick, and they don't become sick. So fundamental to this, for the shaman to heal their beliefs, is to understand how toxic they are. That it is our beliefs that create disease. There are no beliefs that create health. In fact, when you're able to suspend belief, which is an unconscious reaction to the world, you're able to create psychosomatic health, extraordinary psychosomatic health. You're able to marshal resources of the soul that are able to change tremendously toxic environments around you, that are able to change physical disease. So the greatest toxins that we're exposed to are the endogenous toxins, or the brain parasites that we carry within us that predispose us to live ordinary lives. And our opportunity today is to live extraordinary lives. When we're trapped in the ordinary, we continue healing in an ordinary way. We continue working on the old familiar dramas and traumas, continue working on our mommy and daddy issues, which we all need to address and resolve. But there's nothing sadder than meeting somebody who's 65 years old and still working on their mommy daddy stuff. Come on, grow up. How about taking the planet on? Let's work on planetary issues. Your mom and your dad did the best they could. Let them go. How about doing the best that you can to bite off more than you can chew? To take on a really big concern and heal it in your life. And when we find peace within us, our world becomes one of peace. Violence no longer lives in us. When we find health within us, disease changes. You don't have to treat the symptoms of disease because you have detoxified those beliefs, cleansed the body, and health is restored. So this is, to me, has been one of the greatest teachings of the medicine way. How everything that we perceive is the projection of an internal map that we carry. And let me give you an example of this. I was in the Amazon one time and walking through the rainforest, which is glorious, magnificent, extraordinary, exquisite. And we came to a clearing in the rainforest, and the medicine woman and her husband that I was with say to me, Alberto, walk across the clearing and see what happens when you get to the other side. And I did. I walked across the clearing and I entered the jungle, and the first step that I took, it was full of song. The macaws, the parrots, the monkeys. The second step, the third step, and then everything stopped. And the medicine woman and her husband come to me and they say, you see, the animals know that your people were kicked out of the Garden of Eden, that you don't belong here, And I go, sure. I mean, I might be from California, but, I was convinced that the animals were smelling my underarm deodorant and my hair mousse and my athlete's foot powder, my toothpaste. And there were two Shipibo Indians at the very edge of the river. They were cooking their afternoon meal. They were cooking a boa, a serpent, on a spit. And they were collecting the boa fat. And I went up to one of them and I asked them if I could have some of the boa fat, which they gave me a Coca-Cola can that had been, the top had been taken out. And I stripped down to my shorts and I start smearing my body with boa fat. And they're looking at me a little bit strangely, and I go, it's okay, I'm an anthropologist, and because I was convinced I was going to walk back into the Amazon and the animals were going to smell another boa slithering back into the jungle. Well, I smear my body in boa fat, and I take the first step into the rainforest, and it's full of song. The second step, the third step, everything stops again, except for about 400 flies that I had around me. And it wasn't until a decade later that I was able to walk in the rainforest and have the animals continue singing while I was there. They recognized me as somebody who belonged in the garden, somebody who did not believe that I had been cast out of the garden, somebody who belonged to the earth, a child of the earth, a child of heaven and earth. So when we're embarking on our own healing journey, these are the archetypal, the collective beliefs that we have to repair. The beliefs that we don't belong. The belief that we're separate from creation. The belief that humans are not animals. In my next book, the very first paragraph of the book that I'm working on begins something along the lines of, this is not a book about becoming more spiritual or more human. This is a book about becoming more animal, about becoming part of nature, about recovering our instinct, an instinct that has become flawed. And these are the deep structures that we need to heal. These are the deep landscapes of the soul that we need to change and repair and modify. And indeed we have internalized these beliefs that we do not belong in the world. And some of them are very toxic. My agent, who, when I write a book, sells my books, a wonderful woman. I love her. I've known her for 25 years. And her instinct is totally flawed when it comes to men. I mean, if we're at a gathering and there's a single psychopath in the room, she will fall in love with him. From across the room, from way the other side, she'll go, there he is. This happened to me with her once. There he is. I go, whew, my soulmate. He's just walked into the room. I go, well, introduce me to him. She says, no, I haven't met him yet. And she says to me, Alberto, bring him to me. I go, wait a minute. So she manages to connect with him, and the next day I get a call from her where she tells me that this guy was a total lunatic. He was a child molester. But she cannot help herself. And similarly, our human instinct has become flawed. We're attracted to the people that will hurt us. We run away from the people that will help us. We think that comfort is what our soul wants when our soul truly wants adventure. We think that safety has to do with how much we have. And so part of our deep healing, of healing these internalized belief structures, is returning to our natural instincts, to our natural self, to our self that is an explorer, our self that likes to take risks, that is willing to take risks, instead of that self that continually seeks safety, the more scary that the world becomes. And see, this is the difference between the shaman and the ordinary person that lives within the cultural trance of the ordinary. is that, I was born in an island. I was born in Cuba. And whenever there was a tropical storm blowing by, a hurricane coming through, everybody would go to high land, would go to the hills and leave the beach, except the shamans. The shamans would be running to the beach with their surfboards, because this is when the good waves were coming. And believe me, we're in the middle of a great storm. We're in the middle of a great storm that for some of us is happening physically, literally, for some of us emotionally, for some of us through the loss of a loved one. All of us are going through deep change right now. The waves are getting bigger. Time to get our surfboards out. The task, of course, is to stay on top of the wave, not under the wave. So to come back to our starting point, in the shamanic worldview, everything that we perceive is the product of an internal map about the nature of reality that we carry within us. And if we can change that map, the world will change dramatically. We'll come into right relationship with the world. The universe will begin to conspire on our behalf because it recognizes us as a creator, not somebody who is a victim of a creation that was outlined and designed 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago when the earth was still flat, when we still lived in a universe. We don't live in a universe any longer. We live in a multiverse. Before the Hubble Space Telescope, before we realized that the earth turns around the sun. Now, there's one story that I'd like to share, which is the story that I first heard among the shamans in the Andes, that believe that we keep coming back, that we reincarnate, that we come back over and over again, but that we reincarnate not as individuals only, but rather we tend to come back as communities of men and women that have been together many times before, which is why we sometimes recognize each other. There's a deep recognition of somebody that you've just met, and you don't know from where, but you sense that this is a brother or sister. This is someone that is of your clan, of your tribe. And the story is that before we were born, that we were all gathered in a great grassy field, huge green field, and a very, very large angel comes out. And the angel says, this is going to be a very challenging time in the earth. There's going to be crisis. There's going to be earthquakes. There's going to be climate change. There's going to be famine. There's going to be war. There's going to be rap music. And we need healers. Who would like to come? And we all raised our hand. We all stepped forward. We all said we want to be part of the solution. We did not want to miss out on the tremendous party that is happening right now during 2012. But it's just starting now, because 2012 is simply the tipping point. This is the tipping point. This is when everything changes. Everything has already changed. And this is the time when we need to clear the lenses of perception so that we can perceive the essence of reality. Now, for the shaman, this is very practical. We learn in the Eastern traditions that the world is Maya, that the world is an illusion. Well, the world is real, but only because we perceive it as such. The minute that we shift our perception, we find how malleable and moldable it is. We find, in effect, that what we call our three-dimensional reality, it's really a shadow of a multidimensional existence, of a spiritual existence that we all share. In the same way that our physical shadows are two-dimensional shadows of a three-dimensional self, that everything that we perceive here, including our bodies, everything that we perceive as material is simply a shadow, a three-dimensional shadow of a hyperdimensional reality that we all source from. And the minute that we shift our point of source, back to that hyperdimensional reality and understand that we are a drop of consciousness in a body, a drop of consciousness that is infinite, that everything in the universe is alive, then we're able to dream the world into being effectively and not simply do the patchwork and the repair that so many of us are caught in today. And, you know, in the Andes, there's a tradition where you do what's called a despacho. A despacho is actually a prayer ceremony where you build a mandala on a piece of paper with the seeds and the leaves and the flowers and the corn, all of the fruits, all of the seeds that you collected from last year's harvest. The very finest grains are used to make an offering to Mother Earth and to Father Sky and to the Great Spirit. And in the middle of the offering, there's a seashell is put at the very center that represents the feminine. And inside the seashell, there are two pieces of foil. One is a piece of gold foil, and the other one is a piece of silver foil. They call it the Cori Libro and the Colque Libro, the golden book and the silver book. And the legends say that we're all born with one of these books already written, and the other book is blank. And that we can spend our lives editing that book that has already been written, correcting the genetic inheritance that predisposes to heart conditions or breast conditions, or repairing the family karma, that we can spend our lives editing that book, or we can take up the pen and start writing a new and original book in the empty one, in the blank one. Now, there's no doubt that we have to do some editing on the book we're born with, especially if you're faced with a health crisis or with any kind of crisis in your life. When you're bleeding, you've got to patch it. But then we have to bring our attention to that open book whose pages are blank, and that's inviting us to take up the pen in a really creative manner, to write an original story that has never been written before, that is not an iteration or a version of one of the big movies that we watched when we were children, to write a truly original story. So this is how we clear the lenses of our perception. We take up that pen. We know that we are spirit made flesh, and we write the story of our journey through life, and in the process, we craft the most extraordinary scenarios that we possibly can. We launch ourselves on an adventure and not on a healing journey to repair the first 6 years of our lives, which we have to do. And in the process of launching ourselves in a great adventure, the first 6 years of our life, or the first 10 years, or the first 40 years of our lives are repaired. It's what we spoke about with what Dr. Mark Hyman and I were doing this past week. We were saying to our participants that the minute that you create wellness, disease goes away. When you create health, illness changes. Similarly, when we create the great life adventure that we were born here to lead, when we go through the process of the Great Awakening, which is what we're doing what we do in our expeditions to the Andes, where we visit ancient places, sacred sites, meditate with medicine men and women who've been coming here for 10,000 years. We recognize that our journey is not simply a journey through our jobs or through our families or through parenting or our careers, but that we're actually on a journey through the stars, on an infinite journey, and that we're the authors of that journey. So, Robin, what I would love to do is to perhaps open the mic up for a few questions from our listeners. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea. I think there's been a lot of people sending in comments, and thank you so much. It was really insightful.
Thank you.
I'm taking up the pen. I'm going to write a new story.
You know, this is the best opportunity to go out and buy a nice new pen. This is what I did when I realized that I was faced with one of those great changes. I went out and bought this beautiful fountain pen But I
Oh,
can now
nice.
come and got a journal and took pen to paper. This wasn't a book that I was writing for an audience. This was my book. So yes, absolutely. Great idea.
Great. So, Caitlin, are there some questions?
Yes, we have some questions. The first one is from Andrew.
Alberto.
Hello, Andrew.
Hi. My question is, how can we affect or um, how can we affect a positive change and concrete change in perceptions and beliefs in people who are otherwise defeated to the possibility of change?
Well, what you shared with me is a belief that there are people that are resistant to the possibility of change, and that you need to create in them the possibility to shift their own perception. Well, I think if you are able to shift that perception in you, then you will find that they will shift theirs. Do you follow me?
So, for instance, one of the things that I kind of bring to mind, bring to mind in the people is when they are constantly making a negative affirmation, then this is creating their kind of negative feeling and creating the negative perception.
Absolutely. In fact, when you buy medication, if you still buy medication, I will stay away from all Western medication, but if you buy it, be sure you don't read the precautions that come with those medicines, because you'll get sick, because it's full of negative affirmations. So yes, you keep a very vigilant eye about that.
Do you think giving people a kind of positive affirmation to replace with a negative, such as you would with EFT or some kind of ritual?
The question is, you don't need to change anyone else. So you don't need to change your affirmations. You simply need to hold to your outlook on life, which is neither positive nor negative. It's simply neutral. Life simply is. And it's a story of I hope I can remember the details of the story, but a man who, a farmer who has a son, and the son falls off the horse and breaks a leg, and the neighbors come and say, what terrible luck. And the old man says, good luck, bad luck, who knows? And the next week, the king's men come and they round up all of the young men to go to war. And they leave the young man behind because he's got a broken leg. And all the neighbors say, what luck your son had. And he says, good luck, bad luck, who knows? So the attitude that I encourage people to cultivate is one of simply being the witness, of observing, of non-judgment. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this negative? Is this positive? It simply is. And when you offer no resistance to any one set of beliefs, then they are more comfortable dropping that belief structure. Do you follow me?
Thank you, Alberto. I had to take him off to make the next person a presenter.
Yes. Okay.
So this next one, actually, she had to sign off because she was having computer problems, but she sent me a question. This is from Mary Armendariz, and she writes, can I heal my own luminous energy field? And is this information in Shaman Healer Sage?
The information is in my book, Shaman Healer Sage, and yes, you are the only one who heals. You can heal your own luminous energy field. The luminous energy field is an information field that surrounds the physical body. It's the template, it's the blueprint that organizes the physical body in the same way that a magnet organizes iron filings on a piece of glass. It has all of the information to code for health or for disease. Now, biologists tell us that only 5% of our DNA is coding, only 5% of our DNA codes for proteins, and that the other 95% is actually junk DNA. Well, what happens when you're able to break free of the family beliefs, of the family paradigms, of the cultural trance that we were all educated into, is that you can begin selecting from the other 95%. You no longer have to select only the genes that will lead you to learning through heart disease, or that will lead you to learning through trauma. We can begin to select for those genetics and those psychological dynamics that will allow us to learn and grow through joy and no longer through suffering. Yes, you can heal your own field.
Thank you.
And you can find it in my book, Shaman Healer Sage. Buy a copy for a friend too. I have 2 kids I'm putting to college.
I'm going to buy a copy of it.
All right.
We have our next question from Rutger Scherenberg, and he has a mic. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, Caitlin. Hello, Alberto.
Hello, Rutger.
Hello. The question I have regarding my sister. Just 2 weeks ago, we've heard that she's been diagnosed with breast cancer. And, what my question is how can I help her change her perception to help her heal? Because at the moment she's been diagnosed to go through the whole usual shebang of operation, amputation, chemo, 5 years of what do you call it? Some kind of therapy afterwards. I don't want to see her go through that because it's, well, I don't need to explain that, I guess.
Yeah, of course not. No, I understand, and my sympathies to you and of course to your sister. But the important thing to remember is that we're not our diagnosis. And our Western medical system is it's a system that is based on hopelessness and desperation.
Mm-hmm.
And Western medicine is extraordinary for trauma. If you have an automobile accident or if you're bit by a rattlesnake, you don't want to go to your shaman. You want to go to the emergency room. And then you want to go see your shaman to find out why the snake bit you in the first place. But if you have a chronic condition, Western medicine is quite limited in what it can offer. And we want to be sure that we don't become our diagnosis, so we don't become a patient, and that we support our body's innate healing mechanisms. Chemotherapy doesn't heal you. It's a brilliant, beautiful spirit making a journey through life, and that she can heal her soul, her mind, and her body. Thank you, Rutger.
Okay, thank you. You cut out very briefly there, I have to say. I think it might have been for everyone, so we missed the last part of what you were saying.
Yeah, what I was saying is that we have to make sure that we don't become our diagnosis, that we're not a diagnosis. I have a good friend who's written many books, and you would know him, so I'm not going to mention his name, but he was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and he came back devastated to his partner, and she said to him, "No, honey, well, you don't have testicular cancer. What you have are these unusual spots in your testicles, and we're going to eliminate those spots." And within 3 weeks, those spots went away. Well, the mind and the beliefs that we have about our healing can influence the outcome of all of our medical treatments. So we have to be sure that we enlist all of the help and support that the Great Spirit gave to us.
Okay, thank you so much for going over that again. Okay, our next question is from Debbie Newman, who doesn't have a mic, and she writes, Alberto, you referred to drinking polluted water but not being affected by it because of the internal belief. If we do not believe that someone can commit sorcery on us, is this enough to protect us?
Yes, but you have to be sure that you believe that in every cell in your body. If there's a single cell that does not believe that, you're in trouble. In fact, we have over 100 trillion cells in our body. And the interesting thing is that out of those 100 trillion cells in our body, 90 trillion of them do not belong to us. They're part of the microbes and bacteria that line our gut, that help us to digest foods. But all of these, so we're really more of a colony physically than a single being. And every one of these 100 trillion cells has to make the survival of the organism, of the whole body, its priority. When one of these cells, or 10 of them, or 100 of them, believe that their personal survival is more important than the survival of the body, we end up with cancer. So that the shamanic healing processes, and can you hear me, Caitlin? The shamanic healing processes have to do with enlisting the colony to support the well-being of the entire organism. So the answer is yes. If you deeply hold in every cell in your body that no one can do anything harmful to you, nobody will. Absolutely.
Thank you. And yes, your sound sounds great now.
Good.
Okay. Our next question is from Jennifer Hurst, and I'm asking for her also. She writes, working with the belief that the meaning of awakening is realizing your God self. How does one go about awakening? This is a much needed realization. I feel like my well-being depends on it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, the awakening means most of us go through the world asleep. In fact, when the shamans talk about dreaming the world into being, we have to understand that they have a belief system, or what we call a mythology, that says that you can dream with your eyes open. Whereas for us in the West, we have stuffed the domain of dreaming into our sleep time. We dream with our eyes closed. So the awakening refers to waking up from the trance, waking up from the cultural trance that defines what's possible for you, what's permissible, what you're allowed to think and feel. And it's happening to all of us today. This is what 2012 is about. It's a call to the Great Awakening. And as we do so, we're able to remain conscious even while we're asleep. As we awaken, we begin to live illumined lives. We look around us and we see that indeed the king has no clothes. And we take responsibility for the well-being of the planet. We know that every thought and every action has an impact on reality.
Thank you. And for our next question, we have someone with a mic and a camera. Okay. Hello? I'm not going to try and pronounce your name, but it would be great if you could introduce yourself.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi, Alberto. My name's Yakov. I'm from the UK. Thank you very much. I'm enjoying the presentation very much.
Thank you, Yakov. It must be close to midnight for you out there, huh?
It's not quite that late. Only 9:10 in the evening.
Okay. Well, we have somebody from Romania on the line, and I know it's probably 1 in the morning for them.
Yes, it gets later the further east you go.
How could I help you, Yakov?
I was interested in what you were saying. You were talking about there's a moment when you said in the presentation that one needs to do the healing of this feeling of being surrounded by hell on all sides before one dies, because otherwise it's too late. And I found that curious, because I was wondering, well, my response to that is that not just another story or another belief? Like, or could you explain more what you mean by that in terms of what we lose in terms of our choicefulness or our ability to dream when we die?
Well, this is the traditional wake-up call. You know, the shamans in the high Andes are oftentimes called by lightning, and which means that lightning strikes them and it reorganizes their brain in some way. And if they survive, they awaken to their calling and they begin the learning process. They'll learn from their teachers, they'll learn from the mountains, they'll learn from nature, and they'll learn directly from spirit. And at the beginning of my work as an anthropologist, I was a medical anthropologist before I went through my own shamanic training. And what I do today is to train Western shamans in our schools in the U.S. But I used to think that this was a great honor to have been struck by lightning. And one time, one of the old men says to me, Alberto, you're only struck by lightning when you don't listen to the call the first or the second or the third time. Then you have to be hit over the head. So and your world has to be shaken up and your body has to be burnt. So the problem is that we've become so comfortable, even with our own discomfort, even with our own emotional difficulties and problems, that we prefer to keep working on them than to go through the great initiation, through the death and rebirth process. So the awakening, when we don't respond to that sweet, gentle call from spirit, usually comes in the form of a great big sledgehammer hitting you in the head. Are frequently called to the ways of spirit by being struck by lightning. And how I thought it was a great honor to meet these individuals. And one of the old men said to me one time, Alberto, you're struck by lightning when you're so dense and thick and stupid that you miss spirit's sweet and gentle calling. So spirit comes and whispers to us in the wind. We have the calling. We have the calling to awaken, to respond to that call. And we keep postponing it. Many of us say, well, like I did, when my children are grown, maybe I'll say yes to spirit. When I have enough money or I have enough time. And eventually then lightning comes and strikes. And at that point when lightning does strike, you want to have someone help you go through your initiation, through the death of every one of those limiting beliefs that required you to learn by lightning or by suffering, so that we can learn directly through knowledge, so that we can avoid the next lightning strike. So, Caitlin, we'll take one more question, and then I think we'll round it out. This will be our final question.
Okay, and I just wanted to let you know, Yakov just messaged me and said that he was hit by lightning when he was 22, 36 years ago, and it was the biggest wake-up.
That's why I used that example for
him. Okay, so one more question. Let's see. So Renee D writes, for those of us with small children, what are some things we can do now to positively influence the beliefs they are forming? Thank you.
You know, the way that children learn, every child learns by putting the world into their mouth, by putting in it the first few years of life. You're trying to eat the world, and so what we can do with our children is introduce them to nature, to the elements. My kids would come to fire meditations or fire ceremonies before they could walk. They would crawl over to the fire and put a little stick in and say a prayer. Introduce them to their Aboriginal roots. So I think we're going to wrap our session up for today. I want to thank everyone who joined us. And those of you who are called to explore a little bit more of the awakening in Peru, come visit our website. We still have a few openings available for our journey in July for 2 weeks among the prophecy keepers of the Andes. And blessings to everyone, and back to you, Caitlin and Robin. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much, Alberto, for being with us. It's just delightful to be with you again. And I know your journey to Peru is going to be extraordinary. And I really hope that everybody who is able to go will join you. And we'll be sending out information to everyone also. And really, blessings to you and all your work.
Thank you, my dear. Goodbye, everyone.
Okay, bye-bye.